The city was not a city anymore. Once it was bright, full of shining towers and alien markets. Now it was broken, the streets filled with smoke, neon lights flickering, and shadows moving like hungry ghosts. Among the noise of drunk voices and the sound of metal boots, one small voice cried out, "Mighty human, my mother's been taken. Please save her." The voice was thin, shaking, and filled with tears. It belonged to a small alien child, no more than 10 years old, her skin pale with fear, her eyes glowing faintly in the dark. She stumbled through the crowded street, pulling at strangers' hands, begging them to listen. But the people laughed or turned away. Some muttered cruel words. "Not my problem," or "Slavers take who they want." No one stopped, no one cared. The girl kept running, her bare feet scraping the cold ground. Her voice grew weaker, but she did not stop shouting, "Mighty human, you can save her. I know you can." In the corner of the street, in the shadow of a broken sign, sat a man. He was human, tall but bent slightly forward, his body wrapped in a worn coat that had seen too many battles. Scars crossed his face, his eyes cold like steel. People whispered about him in fear. They called him a living weapon, a man who had once destroyed armies, a soldier who had followed orders until his soul cracked. Now he was just a ghost sitting in the ruins. Or so he wanted the world to believe. The little girl stumbled toward him, her hands clutching at his sleeve, her voice trembled. "Please, mighty human, they took my mother. They dragged her to the raiders' den. They will hurt her. Please save her." For a moment, the man did not move. He did not even look at her. His mind was filled with echoes of the past. Screams of war, burning cities, orders shouted into his ears. "Destroy, human. Kill, human. Break everything, human." He had done it all. He had become nothing but a weapon. And when the wars ended, when his commanders vanished, he was left with silence, and guilt. But the child's hand was still there, small and trembling. Her eyes stared at him with a mix of terror and hope. Nobody had looked at him like that in years. Nobody had begged him like that. They all feared him. But this child believed in him, believed that he could save, not destroy. He finally lifted his head, his voice rough, almost broken. "Why me?" The girl's lips shook, but she answered with all the strength in her heart. "Because you are strong, stronger than anyone. You are the mighty human." Her voice cracked. "And my mother will die if you do not help." The man closed his eyes. Every part of him wanted to push her away, to stay in the dark corner, to forget he was not a savior. He told himself he was not a hero. He was a weapon, nothing more, but deep inside, something he thought was dead began to stir. It was not anger, not rage, it was something softer, something he had lost long ago. The memory of why he once picked up a weapon, not for orders, not for power, but to protect. The child's voice echoed again, this time softer, like a whisper only he could hear. "Mighty human, please." Around them, the crowd kept moving. Nobody cared, nobody stopped. The girl had chosen the one man everyone avoided, the one man everyone feared. And maybe, just maybe, she had chosen right. The man's fingers tightened around the strap of his old pack. His eyes opened, cold steel now burning with a new fire. He stood slowly, his tall frame casting a shadow that made the nearest aliens step back in fear. The girl gasped, hope lighting her face. "You'll help?" He looked at her for a long time. His voice was quiet, but it cut through the noise of the street like a blade. "Show me where they took her." The girl's eyes filled with tears, not of fear this time, but of relief. She grabbed his hand tightly and pulled, her small steps racing forward, his heavy boots following behind. For the first time in years, the living weapon was walking with purpose. But as he followed the child into the darker alleys of the ruined city, a thought burned in his mind. This was not war, this was not orders. This was something else, something dangerous. Because if he stepped into this fight, he knew the truth. The weapon inside him might never sleep again. Still, he followed, for in the cry of a desperate child, the living weapon heard something he could not ignore. Not commands, not fear, but a plea for hope, and hope, he realized, was heavier than any weapon he had ever carried. The night grew colder, the alleys darker, but the cry for help still echoed in his ears, and step by step, the man who was once only a weapon began to change. Though he did not know it yet, this was the beginning of his new purpose. The girl's small hand pulled at his larger one. Her steps were quick, but her voice shook with fear. They took her into the iron gates, the slaver's den. No one comes back from there. Her eyes glanced up at him as if he was not a man, but a shield sent from the stars. The human walked silently, His boots heavy on the broken stones, the crowd parted when they saw him. Whispers spreading like fire. "Look, it's him. The weapon. Why is he moving again? Who dares wake the beast?" He heard their words, but he did not care. Their fear was an old story. One he had lived with for years. What he feared was not them, but himself, because once, long ago, he had been unleashed, and when he fought, he did not stop. He had no master, no control, only destruction. He had sworn never to be that thing again, but now a child's desperate cry had dragged him back to the path he thought he left behind. The girl slowed, her breath sharp, and pointed ahead. Through the fog, a massive building rose, steel gates, spiked walls, red lights burning above the doors like blood. The mark of the raiders, slavers who ruled this district with fear. The human stopped, staring at the gates. His mind burned with memories, chains, screams, the clash of weapons. Orders shouted into his ears. Kill, break, burn. He clenched his fists until his knuckles turned white. The girl looked at him, her small voice breaking. "You'll save her, right?" For a long moment he said nothing. The silence stretched heavy between them, inside him. Two voices fought. One told him to walk away, to return to the shadows. The other told him this was his chance. Not to destroy, but to protect. But protection meant fighting. And fighting meant waking the monster. He finally spoke, his voice low and rough. "I am not what you think, child. I was made for war, not for saving." The girl's lips trembled. But she shook her head. "No, you're wrong," she said. Her voice shaking yet filled with courage. "They told stories of you, even in the slums. They said you fought armies, you broke chains. You crushed those who thought themselves gods. If you could do all that, then you can save one mother. You can save my mother." Her words cut into him deeper than any blade, because she was not asking for a weapon. She was asking for a savior, and he had never been one. But the hope in her eyes made it impossible to refuse. He turned his gaze to the iron gates again. For a moment his face was hard like stone, but then he sighed, a sound that carried years of pain. "I will go inside," he said, "but listen carefully, child. Once I step through, I may not come back the same." The girl's grip on his arm tightened. "I don't care if you change as long as my mother comes back alive." The human almost smiled. A bitter smile. She did not understand what she asked. But maybe it was better that way. Innocence gave her courage. Courage gave him a reason. He moved closer to the gate. Two guards stood there, alien raiders with sharp blades and cruel eyes. One sneered, "Human, go back to your hole." "This is not your business," the other laughed. "Or maybe you want chains too?" The girl gasped, fear gripping her, but the man did not stop. His voice was calm, almost too calm. "You have someone that belongs to this child. Release her." The guards exchanged looks, then burst into cruel laughter. "She thinks her pet can fight for her," one mocked. "Old weapon has rusted," the other sneered. Raising his blade, the human stepped forward, his shadow stretching across them. The laughter faded as his eyes burned with quiet fire. For years, people had seen him as a weapon without a master, a beast waiting to be chained again. But standing here with a child clinging to his sleeve, he felt something different. He was not anyone's slave, not the army's, not the raiders, not even his past. For the first time, he would fight for his own choice. The guards lifted their weapons, but their hands shook, because in his silence, in his steady steps, they felt something terrible awaken. The weapon that once broke empires. But this time the weapon walked not for war, but for a single promise. He stopped before the gates, his hand resting on the cold metal. His voice rumbled like thunder. "Tell your master, the human comes." Inside the den, shadows stirred, chains rattled, laughter echoed. The girl pressed close to him, her heart pounding like a drum, and in that moment, the man knew. He could not turn back. The path of blood and fire had opened again, and the weapon inside him was already awake. The gates groaned as they opened, the sound of iron scraping against iron echoing like a growl from the dark. Beyond lay a world of shadows, broken walls, rusted cages, and fire pits glowing red. It was not just a den, it was a graveyard of hope. The air smelled of smoke, sweat, and fear. The human stepped inside first, his tall figure heavy and silent. The girl clung to his coat, her small body trembling. Her eyes darted left and right, staring at chained figures crouched in corners, their faces hollow and eyes dim, slaves broken and forgotten, watching as the strangers entered. Their gazes lingered on the man. Whispers rose again. "Is it him? The human weapon? No. He's just a myth, and he cannot save anyone." But even their disbelief was tinged with something else. A spark, faint and dangerous. Hope. From deeper inside the den, the raiders appeared. Dozens of them. Alien warriors with spiked armor and cruel grins. Some carried whips. Others carried blades that glowed faintly in the firelight. They circled, their voices mocking. Look what wandered into our nest. A rusted soldier. And a weakling child. The girl pressed closer to him, her voice almost a whisper. She's inside. They keep her in the central hall. Her trembling hand pointed to the far end where a massive steel door loomed. Behind it, laughter rumbled, cruel and deep. The raider chief was inside, waiting. The human's eyes narrowed, his chest rising slowly as he breathed. He felt the old rhythm inside him, the rhythm of battle, the pulse of a man made for war. But this time he told himself it would be different. He would not fight for orders, not for generals, not for empires. He would fight for her, for the child, for the mother who still breathed behind those walls. One raider spat at the ground, his voice sharp. You should have stayed forgotten, human, here. You are nothing but another slave to be, the others laughed, their cruel chorus echoing against the walls. The human did not answer with words. Instead, he stepped forward, his boots thundering against the dirt floor. The laughter faltered, just slightly, because there was something in his eyes, something old, something terrible, something that even the cruelest raider could not laugh at for long. The first one charged, a whip cracking through the air. The human's hand shot out like lightning. He caught the whip mid-strike, yanked hard. The raider flew forward and slammed into the ground, bones cracking with the sound of dry wood breaking. Silence fell for a breath, then chaos erupted. Dozens of raiders rushed him, their blades flashing. Their boots pounding, the girl screamed. Tucking behind an old cage, the slaves gasped, some covering their faces, but the man did not falter. His body moved with memory, with scars, each strike precise. Brutal, unstoppable, a knee shattered here. A blade snapped there, the ground shook with every fall. Blood sprayed, but his eyes never blinked. They had called him a weapon once, now they remembered why. More raiders poured from the side tunnels, snarling and shouting, "Kill him! Chain him!" But fear was already spreading in their voices because no matter how many came, the human stood, every punch a thunderclap, every step a storm. He fought like a man who had nothing to lose, and yet inside he knew he had everything to lose. If he failed, the child would break, the mother would die, and hope, the fragile spark in this ruined world, would be crushed forever. The girl peeked from behind the cage, tears in her eyes, but her lips whispered with a kind of prayer, "Mighty human, please win." Slowly the tide shifted. The floor was littered with groaning bodies, weapons broken, chains scattered. The raiders, who still stood, backed away, their courage drained, but then a roar shook the walls. The steel doors at the end of the hall swung open, and from the shadows stepped the raider chief. He was huge, his body armored with plates of dark metal. His eyes burned like fire, his tusks gleamed sharp. In one hand, he carried a massive weapon, part axe, part blade, glowing with cruel energy. The hall grew silent. Even the fires seemed to bow to his presence. The chief's voice boomed, deep and mocking. "So, the human weapon lives. I thought your masters threw you away when the wars ended." He smirked, raising his blade. "You are in my den now, human, and your bones will decorate my throne." The human said nothing. He simply stepped forward, wiping the blood from his face with the back of his hand. His body was bruised, cut, bleeding, but his eyes burned brighter than the chief's weapon. Because behind those steel doors, he knew, was the reason he still stood. The girl ran from her hiding spot and clutched his arm. "Please, don't stop now. She's inside." Her voice was small but fierce, and for the first time in years, the human felt something stronger than the weight of his past. He felt purpose. The chief raised his weapon high, his laugh shaking the hall, and the slaves in their cages leaned forward. Hope flickering in their hollow eyes, the stage was set. The battle that would decide not just a mother's fate, but the meaning of the human's existence, and in that moment, one truth rang clear in every heart. The weapon had entered the enemy's den, and nothing would ever be the same again. The hall shook with the chief's laughter. It was not the laugh of a man, but of a beast who believed himself untouchable. His tusks gleamed in the firelight. His armor clanged with each step. Every chain in the den rattled as if the building itself feared his presence. The human stood still, his body bruised, blood dripping down his arm, but his eyes were cold fire, unshaken. The girl clung to his coat, whispering, "Please, save her." The raider chief swung his massive blade to the ground. The floor cracked beneath the weight. dust rising like smoke. He roared, "You are no savior, human. You are just a weapon built for death." The slaves in the cages gasped. Some looked away. Already certain the man would fall, others stared. Holding on to the smallest spark of hope, the human stepped forward, his boots echoing against the stone floor. He said nothing, but in the silence, every heartbeat grew louder. The chief sneered, "So the beast does not speak? Then let him bleed." With a roar, the chief charged. The hall trembled as his huge body moved like a mountain falling. The blade came down in a deadly arc. The girl screamed, covering her eyes, but the human moved, not like a beast, but like a storm. He dodged to the side, the blade striking stone, sending sparks flying before the chief could recover. The human struck with his fist. The impact echoed like thunder, denting the armored chest plate. The chief staggered but did not fall. Instead, he laughed, a deep rumbling sound. "Good. You have not rusted after all." The fight erupted like fire. The chief's blade sliced through the air, each swing enough to cut a man in two. The human dodged, blocked and countered. Every punch, every kick shook the ground. The sound of steel and flesh colliding filled the hall. The slaves pressed against their cages. Eyes wide, for years they had seen only cruelty, only defeat. Now they watched a battle that lit a fire in their hearts. But the fight was brutal. The chief was no ordinary raider. He was a monster forged in violence. His strength raw and merciless, the human took hit after hit. His coat tearing, his skin bruising, blood ran down his cheek. His vision blurred, yet he did not fall. Every strike he received only made his stance firmer. Every wound only made his eyes burn brighter. The girl cried out from the corner, "You can win! Please don't stop." Her voice cut through the haze of pain, and the human remembered. He was not here for glory, not for war. He was here for her, for the mother behind the chains. The chief lifted his weapon high for a killing blow. The fires in the hall flared, shadows dancing wildly, but the human roared, a sound that shook the walls. He grabbed the weapon mid-swing, muscles straining. Veins burning, the crowd gasped. Chains rattled, and with a surge of power, he twisted the blade away. The weapon clanged against the ground, breaking stone. The chief's eyes widened. For the first time showing fear, the human's fist slammed into his face. Once, twice, again, blood sprayed. Tusks cracked, armor dented. The mighty raider staggered back, howling, but the fight was not over. The chief bellowed in rage, "You are nothing but a beast! I will break you." He tackled forward, his massive body colliding with the human. The two crashed into a wall, stone cracking, dust raining down. The girl screamed again, her hands covering her mouth. But when the dust cleared, the human still stood, blood pouring but his back straight. His eyes burning, he shoved the chief off him. And the hall filled with the sound of chains shaking. The slaves were no longer silent. They were shouting, crying, "Fight, human! Break him! Free us!" The chief snarled, swinging again, but the human was faster now. He ducked, drove his fist into the chief's stomach, then slammed his elbow across the beast's jaw. The raider stumbled, spitting blood, and for the first time the crowd of slaves roared with hope. The human pressed forward, his strikes relentless. Every punch carried the weight of the chains he had seen. Every kick carried the pain of the broken voices around him. He was no longer a weapon without purpose. He was a shield, a fire, a force of will. Finally, with a cry that shook the hall, he drove his fist straight into the chief's chest plate. The armor cracked, the sound like thunder. The chief fell to his knees, gasping, his weapon slipping from his hand. The hall went silent. The only sound was the heavy breathing of the human. Blood dripping, body shaking, but still standing. The girl ran to him, tears streaming down her face. "You did it. You beat him." But the human did not smile. He looked at the steel doors behind the throne. Chains rattled from within, a muffled cry echoing. The mother was still there, still waiting. The battle with the chief was only the beginning. And as the fires flickered across his bloodied face, the truth was clear to all who watched. This was not just blood and fire. This was the rebirth of something greater. The weapon was no longer only destruction. He was the storm that could break chains. The chief lay broken on the ground, his breath heavy, blood dripping from his tusks. The slaves in their cages were silent at first, too shocked to believe what they had seen. Then whispers spread like fire. "He beat the chief. The human weapon. He truly lives." Hope flickered in eyes that had been dead for years. But the human did not look at them. His gaze was locked on the steel doors behind the throne. From beyond those doors came the faint sound of chains clinking, and a muffled voice, soft but trembling. "Help. Please." The girl gasped, her small hand clutching at his sleeve. "That's her. That's my mother." Her eyes filled with desperate light, tears running down her cheeks. She looked up at him as if her whole world rested on his shoulders. The human stepped forward, each movement slow, heavy. Blood dripped from his wounds, his coat torn. But his will was harder than iron. He shoved the broken throne aside and placed his hand on the steel door. The raiders who remained in the shadows dared not move. They had seen enough to know this man was beyond their strength. With one pull, the human ripped the chains off the lock. The doors creaked open, and inside was darkness. He stepped in, the girl close behind him. There she was, the mother, chained to the wall. Her body bruised, her face pale. Her eyes widened when she saw them. At first she thought it was a dream. Her lips trembled. My daughter?" The girl broke free of the human's side and rushed forward. "Mother," she cried, her arms wrapping around the woman as far as the chains would allow. Tears of relief and sorrow poured down their faces. The mother's hands tried to hold her child, but the iron cuffs cut into her wrists. She looked up at the man, her voice weak. Why would you come here? Who sent you?" The human stood silent for a moment. The girl answered for him, her voice fierce. "I called him mother. I called the mighty human, and he came." The mother's eyes filled with shock, then sorrow. She shook her head. "No, you should not have. He is a weapon, child, not a savior. Men like him destroy everything they touch." Her words cut deep, sharper than any blade. The human lowered his gaze. She was not wrong. All his life he had been used to kill, to burn, to break, even tonight. He had left a hall full of blood and broken bodies, but the girl gripped her mother's arm tighter. "No, you're wrong. He saved me. He fought for us. He's not just a weapon. He's our only hope." The human's chest tightened. Her words lit a fire inside him. A fire that refused to die. He stepped forward. His rough hands closing around the chains, muscles tensed, veins burned, and with a roar he ripped them from the wall. The iron shattered like glass. The mother collapsed forward into his arms. Free for the first time in years. She gasped for breath, her body trembling. The girl held her tightly. Refusing to let go, for a moment there was peace. The sound of chains breaking was sweeter than any song. But peace never lasted here. From the hall outside came the sound of boots. Dozens, maybe hundreds, the raider chief had fallen. But his army still lived, and they were coming. The mother's eyes widened with terror. "You must go. They will kill you if you stay. You cannot fight them all." The human helped her to her feet. His voice was calm but heavy with steel. "I have fought worse, and I will not leave you here." The mother shook her head. "Why? Why would you risk your life for us? We are nothing to you." He paused, his eyes meeting hers. For years he had no answer for questions like this. For years he fought because he was told to. Now, for the first time, he knew. "I fight because you still matter to her, and because she reminded me that I am not only a weapon." The mother's lips parted in silence. Her heart trembled at his words. The girl pressed against both of them. Her small voice filled the dark. "He's our protector, mother. He came because I believed outside." The boots grew louder, shouts echoing, "Kill the human! Take the girl! Burn them all!" The human stood straighter, his fist clenched. The girl looked up at him with trust shining in her eyes. The mother looked at him with fear, but also something else, a fragile seed of belief. He turned to them, his voice steady. "Stay behind me." The door burst open, light and shadows colliding. Dozens of raiders stormed inside, their weapons raised, the hall filled with firelight. Chains rattling, slaves crying out. The mother gripped her daughter's hand, trembling, but the girl whispered fiercely, "He'll protect us, mother. He always will." The human stepped forward, the fire burning in his blood. The chains of the past were still heavy on his soul. But in the cries of a child and the gaze of a mother, he had found something greater than orders. He had found purpose. The battle was not over. It was only beginning. And in this storm of blood and fire, the living weapon was becoming something new, a savior who would fight until every chain was broken. The raiders flooded into the chamber like a black tide. Their boots thundered, their blades gleamed in the firelight. The mother pulled her daughter close, shielding her fragile body. The girl's eyes, though wet with fear, still searched for him, for the man who had come when no one else dared. The human stood between them and the storm, his coat torn, his fists bloodied, his breath heavy, but his eyes burned brighter than the torches on the walls. He raised no shield, no weapon, yet he was more dangerous than all the steel around him. The raider chief, broken but still alive, barked from the floor, "Take him down. Break the human." His voice was weak, but his hatred gave it strength. The first wave rushed in, dozens of raiders swinging axes and spears. The human moved like a storm reborn. Every punch cracked bone, every kick sent bodies flying. The ground shook under the weight of his fury, but this time his fury was not blind. It was not the rage of a chained beast, it was sharp, it was controlled. Every strike was not just destruction, it was protection. He fought with a purpose now. Behind him were lives that depended on him, and that changed everything. The girl clutched her mother's hand, whispering, "Look, Mother, he's not just a weapon, he's fighting for us." Her words trembled, but they carried truth. The mother's eyes filled with tears. For years she had believed men like him only brought ruin, but as she watched him stand against an army alone, something in her heart shifted. Could it be true? Could he fight not to destroy but to save? The human's body screamed with pain. Cuts burned, blood dripped, his muscles ached, but every time he thought of falling, he heard the girl's cry in his memory. "Mighty human, save my mother." And he rose again. More raiders poured in. Some tried to circle behind him, but he was everywhere at once. A fist to the jaw, an elbow to the chest, a knee-shattering bone. He moved like a man who carried not just his own strength, but the will of everyone watching. The slaves in the cages began to shout. Their voices, once broken, now rose in a storm of their own. "Fight, human! Break them! Free us!" Their voices fueled him, and for the first time, he understood something deep. He was not created to be a tool, not to serve masters, not to obey orders. He was created to be human, and being human meant choosing. And today he chose to protect. The raider chief dragged himself to his feet. His armor cracked, his face bloody, he roared in fury. "You think saving one woman changes what you are? You are a weapon. Nothing more." The human turned his head. For a heartbeat, his eyes met the girl's. She shook her head fiercely, her voice cutting through the chaos. "No, he's not a weapon, he's our hero." Those words struck him harder than any blade. His heart, once heavy with guilt, felt lighter. He faced the chief again, and his voice was calm but thunderous. "You're wrong. I was a weapon when I had no reason, but now I have a purpose." With that, he charged. The raider chief swung his massive blade. The human caught it with both hands, the energy burning his skin. He gritted his teeth, muscles straining. The ground cracked beneath their struggle. But with a roar, he twisted, and the weapon shattered into pieces. The hall fell silent for a moment. The chief stumbled back, eyes wide with disbelief. The human's fist slammed into his chest. The giant fell crashing to the ground with a final roar. The remaining raiders froze, their courage broken. Some dropped their weapons. Others fled into the shadows. The slaves rattled their chains and shouted louder than ever, "The human! The human is with us!" The girl ran to him, wrapping her small arms around his leg. Her mother followed slowly, still weak, but her eyes no longer filled with only fear. "You fought for us," she whispered, her voice cracked, but it carried gratitude she never thought she'd feel. The human breathed heavy, blood dripping, his body shaking, but he nodded, his voice rough but steady. "I fought because you gave me something worth fighting for." The hall was filled not with silence, but with something new. The sound of chains rattling with hope, the sound of hearts daring to believe. For the first time in years, the living weapon was not fighting because he was told to. He was fighting because he chose to, and in that choice, he found something stronger than war. He found purpose. The hall was quiet now. Broken weapons lay scattered across the floor. Blood stained the stone, and the bodies of defeated raiders groaned in pain or lay still. The fire pits burned low, their light flickering on the chains that still bound dozens of slaves. For the first time in years, silence here was not filled with fear. It was filled with something else. Hope. The human stood in the middle of it all. His body broken and bleeding, his coat torn to shreds. Every breath was heavy, yet he did not fall. He stood tall, his eyes steady, his fists still clenched. The girl rushed to him, her small hands grabbing his arm, her face lit with tears and joy. "You did it. You saved her. You saved all of us." The mother, still weak but free of her chains, walked forward. Her eyes trembled as they looked at him. For years she had cursed men like him. For years she had believed humans were only destroyers. But now she bowed her head slightly, her voice soft. "I was wrong. You are not just a weapon. You are something greater." The slaves in the cages began to cry out, "Free us too!" Break these chains, human. Let us fight beside you. The human turned to them, his face shadowed in the firelight. He walked to the first cage, grabbed the iron bars, and pulled. The metal shrieked and snapped under his strength. The slaves stumbled out, their eyes wide with disbelief. One by one he broke more cages, chains shattered, doors crashed open. The sound was like thunder rolling through the hall. The girl clung to her mother and whispered, "See? I told you. He's our protector." The mother held her close, tears slipping down her face for the first time in years. Her heart dared to believe again. The human finished the last cage, his chest rising with exhaustion. But when he looked around, he saw not fear, not hatred. He saw faces lifted toward him with hope. Slaves who had once given up now stared at him as if he was the dawn itself. He turned back to the girl and her mother. For a long moment he said nothing. Then his rough voice spoke, low but clear. "You asked me to save her, and I did, but you saved me too." The girl tilted her head, confused. "How?" The man's eyes softened. "Because you reminded me that I am not only a weapon, I am a man. And a man can choose his own path." The hall trembled suddenly. The raider chief, broken and battered, dragged himself up once more. Blood streamed from his mouth, but his hatred had not died. "You think this is over, human?" he spat. "Kill me and more will come. Slavery will never end. You cannot save them all." The human stared at him for a long time. Then he stepped forward, towering over the broken chief. His voice was not filled with rage. It was steady, filled with a new strength. "You are right. I cannot save them all, but I can start here. And I will never stop," the chief snarled, but his body collapsed. The last of his strength gone, the slaves roared, their voices shaking the walls. The human lives. "He freed us. He is our protector." The girl looked up at him, her smile shining through her tears. "See, mighty human, you found your purpose." The man's chest tightened. Her words echoed deep inside him. For years he had wandered with no reason. No light now in the eyes of a child. In the chains he broke, he had found it. He stepped toward the door of the den. The freed slaves gathered behind him, the girl and her mother at his side. The night air rushed in as the door opened, cold but clean. For the first time, he felt it, the weight lifting from his shoulders. Not gone, but lighter because he was no longer walking alone. The girl tugged his sleeve. "Where will you go now?" He looked at her, then at the faces behind her. All waiting, all watching, he gave a small, rough smile. "Wherever there are chains, wherever there is someone calling for help, that is where I will go." The mother placed a trembling hand on his arm. "Then may the stars guide you, because this galaxy needs more men like you." The human nodded, his eyes turning toward the horizon. The fires of the den burned behind him, but ahead was darkness waiting to be lit. Step by step he walked into it, not as a tool, not as a beast, not as a weapon, but as something far greater. He was human, and he had chosen his path, a path not of destruction, but of protection, of hope, a living weapon no longer, but a savior with a purpose. And as the dawn rose faintly on the edge of the broken city, whispers spread across the slaves and the streets, whispers that would soon become legend. The mighty human walks again, and this time, he fights for us.